I'm Michael with Prison Professor, and we're back with George Manlove, CEO of a company that really grew quite large, but unfortunately found himself in the crosshairs of the criminal justice system. In previous videos, George not only spoke to us about his background, he also told us what it was like to hire a criminal defense attorney. But despite hiring a criminal defense attorney, despite going to trial, a jury convicted him. And in this episode, we're going to listen to George and learn what happened after the jury returned its verdict of guilty. George, how did you prepare for sentencing?
Well, I went and spent a lot of time with my PSI, my pre-sentence investigation.
You spent a lot of time. What does that mean? What did you even know about a pre-sentence investigation?
I didn't know a thing about it, and I thought it was just a matter of a boilerplate document that the government wanted for whatever reason.
So in the previous episode about hiring a defense attorney, you spoke about spending nearly $750,000 on defense counsel preparing for trial. And you're saying that after you were convicted, you still didn't know anything about this document called, or this process called the pre-sentence investigation report?
I knew that we filled it out and sent it in to the PSI probation officer, and that's all I knew. And I hadn't seen anything since then. And
so after you filled out the document, what happened next? Did you meet with the probation officer?
No. Well, we had the PSI, the pre-sentence interview, and after that, there was no dialogue at all. None.
What did you feel? What level of preparation did you feel when you walked in? Did you go to the federal probation office for the report, or did the probation officer come to you?
We did it over the phone because we live in different states. So he went through the interview over the phone with our attorney on the phone as well.
And what level of understanding did you have on how the pre-sentence investigation report would influence your journey, not only through sentencing, but through the remainder of your term in the Bureau of Prisons?
Quite frankly, I thought the document was just to know what our assets were, so the government had a feel for what they were entitled to.
So you didn't really put much emphasis then in preparing for this all-important process?
We prepared for it. We did what was asked for, but looking back at it now, I know the PSI is probably one of the most important elements of the whole process that I went through, both civil and criminal, because it follows you all the way from all the way to when you're released, and into probation after you're released. And it's an extremely important document. Had I known how important it was, I probably would have got more guidance.
Yeah, it is really important for people to listen to others who've gone through a pre-sentence investigation report, such as yourself, but also to do their own due diligence. You can study online, see what a pre-sentence investigation report looks like. You can study online and learn how that pre-sentence investigation report is going to influence your custody and classification in the Bureau of Prisons, where you sleep, where you work, what programs you can participate in the Bureau of Prisons, when you can transition to a halfway house or residential reentry center, and then what level of liberty you can have when you get onto the other side of the journey on supervised release. But you didn't know about that. How did that influence you when you went to the sentencing hearing? How did that document influence you when you went to the sentencing hearing?
I wasn't even thinking about the PSI. I was thinking about what the government was asking the judge to do in his sentencing of me. Mm-hmm. And that was my biggest concern. What is my sentence going to be, and what is the supervised release probation going to be?
And when you went to the sentencing hearing, what did you hear from the government? What were they asking for?
They were asking for the maximum of the sentencing guidelines, and asking potentially even going above the mandatory minimums.
And your judge, what do you think influenced your judge to give you a 5-year term?
The thing that influenced the judge the most was that none of my letters of support, nor did I acquiesce to the wrongdoings that I was charged with, and he felt I had no remorse and that I was not sorry and didn't apologize, although I did apologize at my at the sentencing hearing for sure.
A lot of times judges can be moved by defendants who express that they can identify somewhat with the victims as the government defines victims or as the judge defines victims, or in your case, as the jury found you guilty. It's not always easy to do, particularly to balance that preparation for sentencing while simultaneously you're trying to preserve your rights on appeal. So
well, that was an important element of the letter I wrote to the judge. Was I did not want to do anything that would prohibit me from filing an appeal.
Mm-hmm. And so your appeal, then, what level of confidence do you have on this appeal bringing some vindication to you and bringing back your, or really purging this guilty conviction?
0.
0. Well, I'm so sorry to hear that, George. I know that's got to be pretty tough, but when you say it with so much force right now, it sounds like you're moving on and preparing yourself for the next phase of the journey.
No question.
When did that start? When did you have that shift in focus to, instead of hanging on and waiting for prosecutors and judges and defense attorneys and probation officers and other people to pull the strings of your life, when did it start that you begin taking the reins back and taking control and pursuing a path that would lead you on to the next chapter?
Quite frankly, it's when I met you.
Well, I think it had to have started before you met me, because otherwise you would have been looking for me.
Well, when I was indicted, I downloaded books. I bought books on people that had stories about being incarcerated. I did as much reading and studying as I could to understand what I potentially was going to be facing. What I've discovered is, in this cluster of entities and departments and divisions of the federal government, there is an enormous lack of information. There's lots of gaps. There's lots of holes. And if you're not willing to go out and take the initiative to understand where those gaps are, you're at the mercy of the government.
Well, I think that you can provide a lot of service, George, and you and I have spoken about this, about sharing details of your story, not only what you experienced going through the criminal justice system, but also how you had that shift in focus. And you started to recognize that there comes a time when you got to deal with the world as it exists and not as you would like it to be. And to hear you say, I'm ready to move forward, I'm ready to say, let's start writing the next chapter of my life, and building strength and pursuing a path that's going to bring us happiness and fulfillment to your family and the rest of your life. I just think that there comes a sense of restored confidence when that happens, and you've got that finality and you say, okay, this is behind me. I'm going to move forward right now. How have you felt since you've made that decision to take back control of your life?
I feel empowered. I feel like I'm looking at the second half of my life now. Mm-hmm. And now I'm going to have the time and to dedicate to what I've always wanted to do, was to tell my story, number one, and to prepare myself for a teaching career and helping other small business owners understand what the minefields and pitfalls are of running a small business.
Well, I think that you're going to be able to do a great job in that, not only giving guidance on how to grow a business from $1 million to north of $100 million in revenues, but also what to do when the tide turns and how an individual can make better decisions. As somebody who's gone through it, you have the credibility. And in our next video, we're going to talk about your deliberate plan of doing that through georgemanlove.com. Is that the name of your new website? Is it georgemanlove.com?
Yes, it is.
So georgemanlove.com. In the next video, we are going to be talking about what George intends to do while he's in federal prison to begin preparing for the next chapter of his life. Back soon.
Thank you.